All right, apologies in advance that this is phone video. Stuff kind of fell apart today when I got ready to do this. We're going to talk about absolute value equations. You've heard of absolute value before. Remember, we write absolute value with these bars, absolute value of x. And hopefully you remember on some level that it's referring to the distance that something is from 0 on a number line. So this is what makes the result always positive. So if I'm talking about the absolute value of -3, if I go to my number line, I go to the left 3 units, 1, 2, 3, and the distance between here and there is 3. For the same reason, the absolute value of +3, I go to the right now, 1, 2, 3 units, so 1, 2, 3. The distance from here to here is 3 units. Because it's referring to distance, that is why the answer is always positive, not because it just changes the sign or does anything crazy like that. We're not always just going to have a number inside the notation though. Because we're looking at equations, now we're going to see something where I've got a variable in there. So maybe the absolute value of x is equal to some value. And at this point, we have to keep in mind what we're actually dealing with. What does this mean, the actual definition? Well, what that tells me is that if I just drop this straight out, that x, whatever it is, will equal the value that we got. But that also tells me that on the other side of things, the negative of whatever x is will also equal that. So we have two possibilities. We're going to end up with two equations to work with and solve when we get ready to start looking through these. And the solving and everything is exactly the same as it was when there was just an equal sign. We're going to be able to do inequalities with these. It doesn't change anything about the way we're going to do things, but we do want to pay attention so that first we isolate the absolute value expression itself. So in my example, 2 times the absolute value of x equals 3, the first thing we're going to have to do is isolate the absolute value. Because this is 2 times that, I'm going to divide the 2 off. That leaves just the absolute value of x is equal to 3/2. And then when I split that into my two possibilities, I know that x could equal 3/2, or negative of whatever x is could also equal 3/2. So when I solve here, I'm just going to, there's a 1 here, remember, so I'm going to divide that -1, and I know that x could be +3/2, or from this last expression, when I do the division, x could also be -3/2. Okay, I have these two choices, so I can just write my solution in braces, -3/2, comma, +3/2. It's a shorter, more efficient way to indicate that we've got two possible solutions for x. Okay, let's try a different one. 3 absolute value x minus 4 equals 9. Okay, the same kind of deal. The first thing I need to do is isolate this absolute value part of the expression right here. The 3 is being multiplied, so we're going to divide by 3. Now the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 3. We're going to apply the same thing we did here. I've got the absolute value by itself, so I know I can write x minus 4 equals 3 and solve it. But I also know that the negative, or the opposite of that, will also equal 3. When I solve here, I'm going to add 4 to both sides. X could be 7. On this side, we could distribute the negative through, but I'm just going to divide it back out anyway. So let's go ahead, divide by -1, and I've got x minus 4 equals, oops, -3. I want to add 4 now. X could also be positive 1. So my two choices here are 7 and 1. Again, I use these braces to indicate this is a solution, not some kind of ordered pair or other information. Okay, we're going to practice a lot in class. Same exact skills we've been doing, we're just adding another layer.